Welcome to NICU Stories.
Well, welcome to NICU Stories. Thank you all for tuning in, and we are testing out our very first YouTube recording, so bear with us on the YouTubers. But once again, welcome back to all my NICU Stories podcast followers. I have an amazing guest today, Amy from NICU Families. She is absolutely amazing. Hi, Amy. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm excellent. Welcome to NICU Stories, and thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today and share your story and some amazing tips when it comes to NICU stories, NICU PTSD, and NICU mental health, and mental health for special needs families. So, how are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to share my knowledge and story, I guess, because I've only done it on my own personal content. So I'm glad that, I can connect with other families and other NICU parents that are also struggling or going through their journey.
Thank you. So tell us a bit about your story. What brought you to the NICU and your motherhood journey?
Okay, so what brought me to the NICU was my son. His name is Luke. Luke is, hold on, I gotta get this right because I say he's 18 months, but he's way older than that now. So let me see, August, September, October, November, December, January, March, April, June. Yeah, he's a year and 10 months now. So way past a year and a half. So he's a year and 10 months and he was born full term. And I had a healthy pregnancy. Everything went well. No problems. And if you know, when we're pregnant at 37 weeks, we get tested for a bacteria called GBS. Mm-hmm. It's completely unharmful. Like it doesn't do anything to adult. Sometimes we carry it, sometimes we don't. It's very normal. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to children, this bacteria can be very deadly, I guess. Like it in the past, and it took lives, right, from children. And now obviously with all of the medical advances, there's been ways to avoid that. So when I was 37 weeks, I got tested for that bacteria and I came out negative. I came out negative with my first child, which she's 4. So he was my second, and I came out negative with his. And when he was born, perfectly healthy, 9 and 10 on the APGAR, I think that's what it's called when they're born, completely healthy. And he was fine. And I started noticing that he wasn't eating. So when my daughter was born, she breastfed as soon as she came out. And he wasn't. He was refusing to eat. He was just kind of getting like antsy. I couldn't figure out what it was. And they're like, don't worry. We don't worry about babies not eating until 24 hours after they're born. And I looked at my husband, I was like, 24 hours? How does a baby go without feeding for 24 hours? And they're like, it's fine. After 24 hours, then we'll start to worry. And I said, well, I'm worried now, But I said, okay, fine, whatever. And so 3 hours passed and I'm still trying to feed him. He doesn't want to. He was just not reacting in the like suction modes or anything like that. He's not reacting. And then by like 3 a.m., he was born at 11. So like at 3 a.m., he started making this really weird noise of like grunting. So like it was like he was crying, but he wasn't really crying. His face was calm. He was calm, but the grunting sounds were like weird. And so something in me, and to this day, my husband and I think that it was just God telling us like, you have to do something. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I called the nurse and the nurse checked him, and they took him from me to just monitor and check him. And I fell asleep. I woke up at 6 a.m. and realized the baby wasn't back yet. And so I asked the nurse, and the nurse came in and she told me that he was in the NICU. And I was like, the NICU? But, I had no knowledge of what goes on in there. Like in my head, NICU babies were preemies. Right. And that's it. Right. And so like, I was like, why is he in the NICU? He is completely healthy. Like he shouldn't be in there. And she was like, well, he's completely fine. We're just monitoring his breathing. He got meconium in his lungs. So that's why he was,
Oh.
so there was something wrong with his breathing. So good thing that you called me and we checked on him. Okay. So that was like at 6 a.m. Then visiting hours started like at 8. I don't know. I don't remember. It was all a blur. We go in there in the morning and it's crazy, right? Because like your baby's in the NICU, you feel weird. You should have the baby. You feel kind of like you're missing something because you just had a belly. Your baby's not with you. So like you're just like, what do I do? So they just like start pumping. Like that's all I did. Start pumping as soon as they took him in. And I was like, okay. And so after that, I went in and we were with the baby. And as time passed, they took some tests and the doctor came in and he said, we tested the baby for blood culture and he has what's called GBS in his blood. And I was like, no, I was negative for that. I tested for that. I was negative. And I had a really bad experience with my OBGYN. I was not happy with them the entire pregnancy and I wasn't able to change them. And so I was already angry with them just overall because there's so much to unpack there, but I just didn't have a good experience with them. And so when they told me I was positive, I said, they did something wrong. And until this day, it's possible that it could have been something that was overlooked by the clinic. And they told me I was negative when I was actually positive. So the doctor's like, I don't know what happened. I'm here just to take care of the baby. And he's positive for GBS, meaning you're positive for GBS. I have no idea how that occurred or your experience, but now we have to take care of the baby. So I said, okay, so what do we do? So the infection started in his lungs, and that's why he was making those grunting noises. So anytime you have a baby, a newborn that makes grunting noises and they're not eating and they're lethargic, you need to get them checked as soon as possible because that's how the GBS shows up, mostly the grunting noises. And the longer you go without catching this, the longer, the more of a possibility of greater damage to the brain.
Right.
So even though most of these are caught like 6 to 10 days after, like when they take them home, that's when the baby starts to show symptoms. Luke started showing symptoms at 3 hours, and I sent him in that early, and he has extensive brain damage.
Oh no.
And so like the more you know about these symptoms, the sooner you catch it and the more likely it is for you to, avoid any of those symptoms. So I'm just kind of putting awareness out there when it comes to GBS. A lot of women don't even realize that they're being tested, but every woman is tested at 37 weeks for GBS. So back to the story. And so the bacteria went from his lungs to his blood. And that was on the first day. Then the second day, which was Tuesday, I was supposed to go home, which we all know that's the hardest thing.
Yeah.
On Tuesday, we went home, but he had a 102-degree fever when we left, and they couldn't bring it down. So it was just terrible going home with an empty car seat, all of the baby clothes you packed, everything you packed to bring him home. Everyone's expecting the baby to be home. Like, my daughter, his big sister, was waiting for him. That didn't happen. So I was just kind of in just like so much depression and anxiety and sadness. I was just distraught. And so was my husband. So we go home, we just drop off our stuff and we're coming back to the hospital. Like we're going to just basically be there as much as possible with the baby. So we dropped off some stuff. And then within 30 minutes or an hour after, we got a call from the NICU saying, you guys should come in. So we drive back, and when we go into the NICU, the charge nurse meets us at the front, and she said, so before you go in, just letting you know that there's a team of specialists and doctors working on your baby. Don't be alarmed, but there's a lot of people working on him right now. And so when we went into the NICU, we walked up, and yeah, there was I don't know, like 5 or 6. Everybody was there. The room was silent.
That has to be traumatizing to walk into that kind of scene.
Yeah, I was just like, I walked in and I said, "What's happening?" And so, I mean, it was our second day, so we didn't have that authority of as parents in the room, right? Like you were like, can I do this? Can I go up to the baby? Can I touch him? Like, I know he's mine, but like, am I allowed to do these things in here, right? So when we got in there, we kind of like stepped back because we knew it was bad, but we had no idea what was going on. And then I asked my husband, like, what's happening? And he said that to look at the monitors and his oxygen levels had dropped to the 20s.
Oh, wow.
Oxygen shouldn't drop below 80.
Right.
80.
Right. Thank you.
And he was in the, yeah, he was in the 20s.
Wow.
And so they were basically giving him, they were bagging him CPR. He was dying. And so they asked me to go up because he was just laying there like lifeless. And so they asked me to go up there and hold him, like, and talk to him and try to get him to focus like on my voice, because basically I'm the only thing he knew. And that the doctor is bagging him and I'm trying to talk to him. I don't even know what to say except like I'm panicking inside.
Yeah, right.
And I'm panicking inside, but at the same time, there's this sense of like peace in my demeanor because, you know, you're holding your baby. And he wasn't doing well. So anytime there was noise, movement, anything, he would drop his stats. Finally, he was able to bring him up to, I think, like low 80s or something like that. And as soon as they did that, they intubated him.
Oh, okay.
And so he was on it was this vibrating machine that just shook like he was shaking. Like, I don't know what this machine is called, but like he was shaking. They were shaking his lungs to try to get his lungs to take breaths.
Mm-hmm.
He did not like that. And he was getting worse again. So they changed him to a different breathing machine. And then this one, I guess they were able to stabilize him. And so we're asking, like, how's the infection, like, how bad is the infection? How bad? And the doctor, because my husband's my husband. He's like very particular in his personality. He has a lot of questions. He likes answers and he wants things to be like A, B, and C, like.
Right.
He's very detailed. I'm the more free-spirited in the relationship. Let's just put it that way. So he's asking a lot of questions and he's kind of like grilling the doctor, and the doctor's like, you know what, doesn't matter right now. My main concern is keeping your baby alive.
Yeah.
That's when it dawned on us, like how bad it was, like how truly close we were to losing him. And so after that, he stayed on the machine for a couple of days. And so the bacteria ended up going, he went septic. That's why he lost his ability to like breathe, and like he had the high fever. He went septic. That's what happened with the infection. So it went from his lungs to his blood. And so then finally we're like, okay, what's the next step? And they're like 10 days of antibiotics. He should be 100% okay. You caught it early. Most of the time when this happens, parents don't catch it till like 10 days after, and that's when you have issues. But because we caught it early, we're stopping the bacteria from spreading. Okay. 4 days later, by this time he had been 1 week old, we're going back and they're like, you know what, we need to do what's called I lost it. It's when they get a fluid from the brain to see if the bacteria is in the brain. Oh man, I forgot what it's called. Anyways, and so they the lumbar puncture.
Okay.
It's a lumbar puncture. That's what it was. So they basically go into the bottom of the back and get fluid from the spine to see how the fluid in the brain. And lo and behold, the bacteria got to the brain. So now he had meningitis. And so with meningitis, they just had to change the antibiotics. And the meningitis, because of that, they needed a specialist. So he was no longer a tier 2 type of NICU. He needed to be at the highest level because of the meningitis. So they emergency transferred him from Riverside Community Hospital to Loma Linda Children's Hospital. And there they continued the treatment for the meningitis. And a week later, they had to do an MRI to see what the brain damage was. and they came back with the results, and the neurologist said that his entire brain is not functioning. He doesn't have any functioning parts of his brain. There's so much brain damage. If you look at his MRI of his brain, there's like if you see like x-rays kind of thing, right? You put them against the light, you see a lot of like white where the bones are. When it comes to his MRI and his brain, you put it to the light, his entire brain is black.
Oh, wow.
And so they're like, he's not going to be able to eat. He's not going to be able to walk. He's not going to be able to talk. He's not going to be able to do anything. Like he's more likely going to develop cerebral palsy, maybe some seizures. So you're going to have to, as soon as that happened, they got us in contact with physical therapists, occupational therapists, speech therapy, all the therapies, right? And they're like, that's it. And that was like, I feel like when he went through that second day and he almost passed away, I still was hopeful because I was like, no, this can't be it. Like my mind wasn't like accepting it. When they told me about his brain damage, I guess that's when everything like sunk in and just kind of like, I went into panic mode inside because I was so just distraught. And so that's where it was. That's what happened. So with his story, that's where we began to accept and take the role as special needs parents. And since he was born, our main goal is to give Luke the best life as possible with the best chances as possible. So we do all his fighting for him, you know? And so he was in the NICU for another 3 weeks, total of like 34 days. They got rid of the infection, they got rid of all of the bacteria. And they're like, here's your baby, go home. We had to get a G-tube. I was like, how am I supposed to feed him like that? Like, it was just, now it's second nature, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, they had to train us on how to feed him through the G-tube, his milk and all of that. And he didn't wake up. He wouldn't wake up. And he was asleep. And I was like, okay, it's been 2-3 weeks. Why hasn't he woken up? So I asked the doctor, and they said that he would probably never wake up. Like, that's the extent of the brain damage, that he probably won't wake up.
Oh my God.
And so I was like, I didn't even know how to process that, right? So we brought him home, and immediately, I mean, we're a family of faith. So we prayed. Like, God was just like the center, and the only reason we kept it together, and the only reason we're like still in a happy marriage, like we still have a good family,
Mm-hmm.
a good environment for Luke, it's all God.
Mm-hmm.
And so we left the NICU and we started our journey, and now Luke is almost going to be 2. He's very drowsy. All of his pictures, you can tell that he's barely opening his eyes, but he still opens them. We know our son in a way that nobody will know them.
Right.
Will know him. We connect with him in his own way. We know he's nonverbal, but he communicates. We know he communicates.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He has this little wheelchair. He looks so cute in it.
Aww.
And we've learned to find joy in our pain.
Aww.
And that's our story for the NICU. I mean, the journey doesn't stop there. It continues on after. We have specialist visits. We've had numerous 911 calls. We've had hospital stays. And but as far as the NICU story, that was it in a nutshell. I mean, mm-hmm. I can go into a lot of detail, but in the NICU, I started to share his story on Instagram. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you want me to go into that right now on how I started getting my passion to help other special needs families. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. So my career and life work before having children was helping people with mental health issues.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm going through that. I left the NICU with depression, PTSD, anxiety. And like I tell people, the depression you go through, it's so weird because you don't really know how to explain it. And I would hear my clients tell me what their depression felt like when they say, I turn off, I'm like a zombie. I just don't feel like, I feel isolated.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I was like, how does that feel like? Right. Because I had never gone through depression. And so when we left the NICU, I was very depressed.
Mm-hmm.
I would look at myself in the mirror and not recognize myself. Like
Mm-hmm.
I would not know who that person in front of me was because I had lost all of my motivation, my personality. Like the person that went into the NICU is not the same person that comes out.
Wow, that's so good.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's
so
true.
I came out and I was like, who is this person? I would look at pictures of times when I was happy
Mm-hmm.
beforehand, and I could not connect to those moments anymore.
Yep.
I could not connect to that person that I would see in pictures. It would be Christmas time and we went with family. And by this time, at this time, our support system hadn't been like, I guess, finessed. We thought everybody was there for us. So we would
Right.
go with all family, right? And the truth is not everyone is, and it's okay. And I don't have any ill will against anybody that is not able to support us in the way we need to be supported, because it's very specific, the kind of support that
Right.
special needs parents and NICU parents need. But we went to Christmas that year. He was 4 months and he had just spent 4 days in the hospital. He got out the 23rd and we celebrate Christmas the 24th. We're Hispanic. So it is the 24th. And so we went and I was sitting there and everybody was having a good time. And, I wasn't, they said hi to me. They were including me, trying to make us comfortable with Luke. And I was looking at everything and it's like, I'm here, but I feel like I'm looking at everything through a glass window.
Like you
Like,
couldn't engage.
I could not engage. I could not connect. There was no, there's no just desire to be around these people, even though they love us, they care for us. And I know I love them, but I just did not find any connection with them. And I just felt isolated. And that is depression. Like if you think of depression as not feeling sad all the time, it's not crying every single day. Yes, that's a huge part of it. But depression is that isolation, that feeling disconnected, that low energy, that not being able to sleep because you're just kind of like in like this emptiness.
Right.
That is a depression. And that was in the episode I was in, right? So depression is through episodes. It's not like I'm always depressed, but you can find happiness within being depressed person. So we would go through depression. My depression would last maybe a week. And then when I would find like something to hold on to and I would have a good day, couple of good days and maybe a week or two. And then I would get depressed again. And that is depression. And then my anxiety came with after he started getting sick, when he started getting seizures. So anxiety started coming in by worry. And one of my worries is, and then to this day, is that anticipatory grief. Like, how long will I have Luke? For a person that doesn't use their body, that doesn't move, like you don't realize how much movement plays a part in your body's ability to live. A body that's not in motion will not continue to go. So we have to move him. We have to keep him in therapy. But like, how long is that? How long will that help him for until he's not able to continue, or like his G tube? One of the things that the neurologist told me when he was explaining that MRI, I asked him like, how long will he live? Like that question was the first thing that came to my head. I've worked with special needs kids before. I've worked with mental health community. So I've seen people with cerebral palsy, and I wonder like, how long do I have him for? Of course, he couldn't answer me. But he told me this, and I've said this so many times, but it's just always stuck in my head. He said, I can't tell you how long he'll live, but you don't see many 70-year-olds with a G tube and cerebral palsy.
Wow.
So he told me that, and basically saying like, don't expect a long life. He told me that without telling me that,
Right, right. Oh gosh.
and I lost it. But so every day with Luke is just a blessing, and he's brought so much joy and love to all of us. But with that, experiencing the NICU, being a special needs parent, you experience anxiety too, right? So going back to that, he started getting seizures. So now my anxiety is always at a peak. Like the recurring trauma that we've experienced causes the anxiety to always peak. Triggers, right? And I'm sure any parent who's been in the NICU for an extended amount of time that has had a lot of difficulties in there, the beeping, you'll never get that out of your head. You hear beep and you're like, oh my gosh, is his sats dropping? Oh my gosh, that was his heart rate. Like, you're like, what's going on? And it's like, it's an alarm, like I hear beeping every night because that's how I know he's eating. So anytime I hear beeping, like, is that his food? Because his pump is running, coughing. Right now he's having a lot of cough dry heaving and gagging. He throws up a lot. And right now, our issue is that he's not holding down food. So I'm always worried that he's going to dehydrate. So I'm trying to get him to hold down food. He is almost 2 years old and he's only drinking 3 ounces of food.
Wow.
I have a 5-month-old who drinks 5 ounces of food.
Wow.
So if you kind of see, and he only eats 4 or 5 times a day. My not newborn, he's 4 months old, so it kind of is a newborn, but my 4-month-old eats 6-7 times a day, and he eats a lot. And this big boy that's almost 2 is only eating 3 ounces, and he throws up almost at every feeding.
Oh no.
So like, my worry is like, okay, what's happening? We can't figure out why he's not holding out his food. So my anxiety, anytime I hear any coughing, whether it's my daughter, my baby, I'm like, who is it? Is it Luke? Because I want to make sure that, Luke doesn't choke on his throw up, right? Because he can't move his head. He has no function of his head movement. Like if he's choking, he can't go to the side to help himself. So there's just so much anxiety. And so anyways, that's kind of what we deal with every day. And with that, I started getting a passion to help parents that have been in the NICU parents and special needs parents, and helping them understand their own mental health issues. Because many times we understand something's wrong. We know we're not okay, but because we can't put a name to it, we don't know how to address it. Or because we can't put a name to it, we can't understand it. So now I created my my Instagram and podcast called the NICU and Special Needs Family. And there I try to bring awareness and education when it comes to mental health and hope to parents. So we talk a lot about PTSD, triggers, dissociation, anticipatory grief, consequences of like suppressing your feelings, therapy, and faith. Like those kinds of things are important things that parents need to understand in order to be the best parent to their child, in order to take care of them the best way. Because if you're not okay, you can't help your child be okay.
Right.
And we live in this fight or flight mode while we're in the NICU. We're always on fight or flight while we're in the NICU. And I've heard it, people are sometimes so ignorant. And I mean ignorant because they just don't know. I don't mean ignorant like to insult them, but people just are ignorant at the fact that they say like, well, at least you get some sleep because the baby's in the hospital and you don't have to stay awake with them all day. And it's like, you realize these daily struggles that you went through and I went through with these healthy babies are things that are supposed to happen. Like you're supposed to struggle at the beginning of a child's life because that's the part of life. And when you have a NICU experience or a special needs child, your perspective about life changes. So now the connection with people is very surface-like. Like you realize that it's very surface-like. Like you're worried about having to wake up at night. Yes, it's hard. I know it's hard. Trust me. I know it's hard. And I don't like it either, but I would never give that up to have my baby in the NICU. Like,
Right.
there's just some things you don't say to NICU and special needs parents, and
I
that's
think
one of
you
them.
hit the nail right on the head when you said we have a different perspective in regards to what's supposed to happen. Like that's a natural part of life, which we all complain about. Well, most parents complain about it, like, oh, you got to wake up in the middle of the night, but you're supposed to when you have a newborn. Like, and not being able to wake up in the middle of the night, that adds to the PTSD, that adds to depression, that adds to
Mhm.
it's just like, I don't hear any crying. Why? Because my baby's not with me. My baby's in the hospital. Like, I would much rather wake up in the middle of the night to my baby crying for food than to know that my baby's not here, but in a whole hospital by themselves.
Yes, exactly. Like, people don't realize that. And so bringing that awareness, because like bringing awareness, like your podcast, it's a great way not only for parents to share their story, because in PTSD, when you go through the NICU, right, you develop PTSD many times. I know I have PTSD, and I can speak for a lot of parents that I know
I
that
for
have
sure
PTSD
did.
from
Hmm.
the NICU. Um, from the NICU experience. So the reason I think that your podcast and like telling stories and sharing your story is so important is because PTSD has this sense of um, reaction to your story. So the more you keep it in and
Hmm.
you don't talk about it, the more you're going to react negatively anytime things that remind you about it come up,
Yeah.
anytime you have to retell your story to the doctor, anytime you have to go through that assessment where your child doesn't meet milestones, anytime all those triggers happen, you're going to have a reaction of depression or anxiety when it comes to PTSD. You're going to have flashbacks and all of that. But the more you tell your story, the more you let go of all of the bad and you start to see the good in your story. And so
Right.
that impact, that emotional impact that telling your story has, it's not as negative
Hmm.
as it would be if you just never tell your story. If you
Right.
keep it in, it's like if you think of a Coke bottle, right? You shake it up, how much pressure does it build? And then finally, when you have to tell your story, you're going to explode of anxiety, depression, and all these
Yep.
emotions, and you're not going to deal well.
Such a
But
good analogy.
right, when you tell your story over and over and over, every time you tell your story is healing.
Yes,
That's
it
why
is.
I like your podcast. I follow a lot of accounts that encourage moms to tell their stories, or parents, not just moms, because dads have their own experience that I
They
think is a
do.
lot of times is overlooked. But when parents tell their stories, their NICU stories, that creates healing, and it's an emotional healing that could never really be replaced by any other way but by telling your story. And
Right.
that's a way that you can deal with PTSD when it comes to triggers and your reactions to the trauma.
Right. Right. I love, love, love all the points that you touched on. I the fact that you broke down how that domino effect of mental health, the breakdown for mental health for NICU parents, and especially the NICU parents who have children who become special needs from the NICU, and that catalyst effect and that layering effect of the mental health breakdown from the shock of you having to leave your child in the NICU, the shock of all the other health issues that come with them being in the NICU for some parents, and how depression, then anxiety, and then the PTSD. Like, I love how you illustrated that because people don't realize that is the breakdown effect for most NICU parents, and especially NICU parents who have children with, special needs or medical special needs. You get that anxiety of every little sound or every little thing. Like for me, my daughter being a 23 weeker, I just had anxiety over people touching her, like simple stuff. She's not special needs,
Yeah.
but you know, you still have that fear because you're like, they were so tiny. You don't want them to get sick. You don't want them to, end back up in the NICU and have any type of episodes. And there's just so many different layers for different parents, and especially for special needs parents, as I've had other parents on who have children with cerebral palsy because of different, for not the same reason that your son ended up having it, but just that breakdown effect. And, not everybody handles it well.
Mhm.
And not everybody can process it the way, each other processes it. Some of them really are depressed and can't tell their story. And I'm so glad that you mentioned the reasons why it's important to share your story, because it's healing for yourself and it's healing for the people that are listening, to encourage them to also share their story.
Mhm.
Do you think because you have the clinical therapist background that helped you process and get through this journey a little easier? Did it help with your healing a little more because of the knowledge that you had?
Um, this is how I see it. I don't feel like it was easier for me. I don't feel like I'm healed yet.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's an ongoing process. And partly it's because it's a recurrent trauma for me because he is
Right.
still special needs and he still is struggling right now. Um, that's why I don't think it's easy. But what my um, education and career prepared me for is to know the signs.
That's good. Mm-hmm.
It's knowing the signs of when you're having an episode coming in, when you're going to need more help than normal, when you're going to need more processing than normal,
Mm-hmm.
knowing when to get help. That's what it's helped me with. Like I know when I'm starting to go into a depressive episode before I'm in it
Mm-hmm.
because I know the signs of depression because I am educated in that, and that's why I want to raise awareness of special needs. I'm sorry, of mental health for
Mm-hmm.
special needs parents, because you need to understand what the signs are before you're actually in a depressive episode. Because once you're in the depressive episode, doing much, you can't do much because you're stuck
Right.
until you somehow get out of it. But if you're starting to see the signs beforehand, you're going to be able to manage it. Coping skills, therapy, support, all that doesn't take away the mental health
Right. Right.
struggles. It doesn't take away the anxiety. It doesn't take away the depression, and it doesn't take away the PTSD. But what all those things do is they help manage your mental health struggles. And that is what you want to do. You want to manage, because the reality of it going away, it's like, for me, I can say that my depression is never going away because of the amount of guilt I carry.
Mm-hmm.
Like I know a lot of people with special needs children and NICU kids have guilt. Like my body wasn't able to keep the baby in for that long. There's a lot of guilt
Right.
on that.
Right.
Or I wasn't able to provide the right um, entrance to this world for my baby. And
Right.
that's why I have guilt. Or like I shouldn't have done this with my baby. Like
Right.
there's just so
So much.
much guilt. Like the guilt that we feel, I feel is like the weight of the world because it's your children that you're supposed to
Exactly.
protect and they're struggling. So I've accepted that guilt is going to be my shadow for the rest of my life.
Mm.
And that's partly why I know my depression won't ever fully go away.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to carry it forever. And sometimes I don't know if it's like cognitive distortion, like a
Mm-hmm.
negative thinking pattern that I may have about myself, like a negative belief system
Mm-hmm.
that I've created within myself. I
Mm-hmm.
can recognize that that could be it too.
Mm-hmm.
But that for now, that's how I see guilt. Because people are like, don't feel guilty. You can't feel guilty. Like you can tell me that as much as you want. And as much as I try to get rid of it, it's not going away. It's still there because I try to pretend it's not there and it's there, you know? And so with guilt, I've learned that it's there, but if you choose to what I call shelf it,
Mm-hmm.
right? Right now, I choose, like there are days when like I want to sit with my guilt. I want to be depressed. I want to cry. Leave me alone. Let me sit with it. Like don't tell me not to cry. Don't tell me to feel okay because I don't feel okay and I want to feel what I'm feeling right now. I want to feel guilty because that's what I'm feeling. That's when I
Mm-hmm.
choose to go into my shelf, grab guilt, and sit with it. And then mentally, I have to decide, okay, I've sat with it long enough. It's been a couple days. I'm going to grab it, put it in a box, shelf it in the back of my head. I know it's there. There's reminders. There's things that people say that make me feel guilty about being a mom to a special needs parent. It's there, but I'm choosing not to sit with it right now. So
Mm.
by acknowledging it,
Mm-hmm.
acknowledging that you have the guilt, but
Mm-hmm.
not always sitting with it, helps
Mm-hmm.
you manage life a lot
Mm-hmm.
better. And that's what
That's
I want parents to do.
really, really, really good that you mentioned the fact that you can sit with it. I have to say, for me, I didn't know that I was going through the depression and the PTSD until after the fact. Like,
Mm,
like you were saying, like how you're not connecting to certain environments, to certain people, which you should be connecting to, but you feel isolated. I felt all those things. And then there was also decline on how I was taking care of myself because I didn't take care of myself. And I think when I started to not take care of myself is when my husband was like, "Are you depressed?" And I was like, "No, I'm not depressed." And then that made me start to think about, well, am I? And I think being on the other side of that, unfortunately, I didn't get there. Well, I don't want to say unfortunately, I didn't get therapy, but I have to say I am healed from that place that I was in. And I do believe that there is a place to be healed and be on the other side of it. Is difficult though when you have a special needs child and you're constantly having to relive that
Yeah.
process. For
Yeah.
me, my daughter's, she's fine. She didn't have any issues. My son, which when I realized NICU PTSD was real, when he had to go into the NICU, he's a full-term baby. And I'm like, this was not supposed to happen. I have a
Right.
full-term child. We made it.
We
Like,
did it right this time.
how are we here again? And that's when I feel like the really trauma hit me. And for us, the ongoing battle is the Hirschsprung's disease. I get very frustrated because, he's not stooling on his own and things like that. But I have to say, I don't allow myself to be guilty. I just have to know how to handle the frustration of it all.
Right.
And I think it's a matter of how you choose to process
Mhm.
the guilt, how you choose to process the depression. And for me, I'm just making the decision to not hold on to it. I have my moment, but I'm tossing it to the side. I'm not putting it on show.
Oh
That's just
yeah,
me.
yeah. Yeah,
'Cause I
no,
don't
that's
want to feel
good.
that.
Yeah, and I think everybody deals with things differently. And I
Exactly.
think that's where the respect for people's journey is. Like
Exactly.
your journey is that way, and that's how you've been able to get through it, and that's great. And this is my journey, and this is how I've been able to get through it.
But
The
there's so many
main
families who are feeling the way that you feel,
Mhm.
especially who have such an intense special needs child, because they feel exactly what you're feeling. They under, and
Right.
I'm so glad you said that because there's a lot of families who, and especially moms, because let's just be honest, moms are dealing with the brunt of this more than the dads, even though dads are hands on. But there's so many moms who identify with what you're saying, and I thank you for being so transparent to mention that because I believe they need to hear that and hear that they're not
Mhm.
crazy. Number one,
No.
you're not alone for feeling that, and how you're processing it is not abnormal.
Yeah, exactly. Some people just choose to not be okay, and it's okay to not be okay, like all that. And I did
Exactly.
want to, point out that you said that you didn't get therapy, and that's okay. I don't think everybody is supposed to get
I
therapy.
wish I did though.
Oh, right. Yeah, and it's okay. But what I'm trying to say is like, not everyone needs therapy all the time. There
Right.
is a time and place for it, and if you're not ready for it, it's okay. Okay, and the way you find out if you need therapy is if you're not managing, right? If
Right.
that's what you want to think of. It's not get rid of everything. You want to get to a place of managing your life in a
Mm-hmm.
way where you're content. Because
Right.
if you want to say, I want to be happy, that's a feeling based thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Don't rely on feelings. Feelings lie to you. I know they're important, but I always tell my clients, like, you can be from like angry to happy in like a split second. Like I could
True.
be angry at my husband and he brings me some donuts and be like, oh, thank you. You made me happy. Right when I was just yelling at you a second ago, right? Like our feelings change so rapidly, so fast that they're not reliable.
Right. Right. Right.
So don't think about, I want to feel happy. Think about, I want to manage my life the best way as possible. And that's when you know if you need, if you're listening to this podcast and you wonder, like, do I need therapy? You know if you need therapy if you're not managing, if you're not meeting your responsibilities. When I say managing, I mean meeting your responsibilities, taking care of your children,
Take
taking
care
care
of
of
yourself.
yourself,
Mm-hmm.
eating, being able to connect with people. That is managing basic life skills. If you can't manage your basic life skills when it comes to your special needs child or your baby or your children or your marriage, and you're like not going to work, you're sleeping all day, you're missing appointments, that's how you know, okay, I can't do it by myself anymore. I need to bring someone in. And that's where you get a therapist. When you're not managing your daily life activities, that is when you need therapy. Not because, some people are just depressed and they're like, I want to process, that's great. But if you're the kind of person that like wants to hold off and it's like, when do I really know? That's how
Right.
you really know if you're not managing like daily life activities.
And I'm so glad that we transitioned to the talks of the therapist, because that's the questions that I have. As a
Hmm.
clinical therapist, do you think, because like you mentioned, sometimes we get to a place where you realize, I need one. In my case, I didn't know I needed one, but I definitely needed one. And especially when going into the NICU the second time, I felt like no one understood the magnitude that they had on me except for my daughter's pediatrician. And he came to me and he said, oh my God, I cannot believe that you have to go back there again. He was like, I am just so sorry. And I felt like it was the only person that really understood the blow
Wow.
that I was experiencing. So in cases like that, Do you feel that it is important for there to be a clinical therapist for the care team for all NICU parents? Because when you're not familiar with the signs, when you're not familiar with the triggers, and especially when you're going through the NICU for twice or more than once, because I know families who've gone through it more than twice,
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't there be a therapist on that team to be able to help you identify with these things so you're not sitting in depression for longer than
Yes.
you should be?
Yes, definitely. And I think it's definitely should be a part of the NICU experience, at least to have and I don't know if maybe, and this is something I've thought about since I experienced it, like having groups, because whether it's therapy or group therapy, connecting with a therapist will help you identify symptoms to manage them.
Mm-hmm.
Connecting with a group helps you identify symptoms and people who are experiencing those symptoms with you.
Right.
So
That's so
now you're not alone. So now you help each other. And having that sense of like, okay, I'm going to help you and you're going to help me, and having that
that
community like
community. Mm-hmm.
we're trying to create, right?
Right, right.
Having this community really is a healing process as well. So some people may need therapy, some people may need group therapy, but I do think is an essential part of the NICU experience that I didn't get. And the thing with me is people are like, "Oh, you're a therapist, so you know what I'm trying to say already, right?" And it's like, yes, I know what you're trying to tell me, but sometimes I still need to hear it, even though I
Yeah,
know. Because
exactly.
when I was going through a depression, I knew it, but I was like, "Ugh, I'm a therapist. Like, I shouldn't be going through this. Like, I should know better. Like, I should be able to manage this because I work in this field. Like,
Right.
how am I going to be this fraud being a therapist and be going through depression? Like, how does that happen? Like,
Oh my gosh.
my clients will think I'm a fraud. And I didn't go back to work for a long time because I thought that I would not be able to be a good therapist. And the truth is, this experience has made me a better therapist because I
Yes.
can connect in such a much more vulnerable and authentic way to clients because of my experience. And you don't have to be a therapist to connect to people and be authentic and provide that support.
Right, right,
So
right.
I think our experiences has given us a new perspective to be able to connect with people, not just people with special needs, but people who are struggling in a way that's like, you know what? Life is hard.
Yep.
It's okay, like connecting with people when you've gone through your own experience. But yes, I do think that NICU wards should have a therapist that, kind of push them a little bit more, push the parents a little bit more, because you saying like, oh, have you thought about helping someone, or here are some numbers, it's not enough. But having this like, okay, there's group going on for NICU parents. Which one are you going to sign up for? Like automatically. It's not a choice. Like, do you want to, do you not want to?
Mm-hmm.
Which one are you going to sign up to? Kind of like push it more in their face.
Right.
And then if they're like, I don't want to, then
You back
they have
off.
to actively deny it rather than passively deny it.
Right,
Right.
right,
There's a
right.
difference, right? When you passively deny it, it's like it's passing by and you're like, eh. But if you actively deny it, meaning it's in your face, you're there, you have to sign up for something and you have to say, no, I don't want it. It's a lot harder to deny something like that, knowing that you need it.
Exactly. I absolutely
But
love how you unpacked your story because you really touched on so many different aspects in regards to the NICU experience as far as mental health, as far as being a clinical therapist, helping with mental health, and then having to experience your own mental health trauma and how you had to overcome that and just the real rawness of it all. And the fact that you even mentioned that you question your own career. It's like so many different things as just parents that we go through that people just don't understand. And, you know, the fact that you're even experiencing the NICU, the fact that you're even experiencing mental health, and then now you're questioning your career, which you've been doing forever because of this experience, and then trying to find a way to overcome it. I just commend you that you've overcome these odds, which could have like been detrimental and, hindered your entire life and changed your entire path, but you were able to overcome it to be a voice and an image and a support for other parents who are experiencing exactly what you're experiencing. So I tilt my hat to you, and I'm giving you
thank you.
virtual flowers
Thank you.
for just being on this journey and being a resource for other parents, especially NICU parents and special needs parents, because it's not easy. And I am just so amazed of your transparency and just the realness that you brought. And like you touched on just so much that I'm like, I really don't even have any questions.
Yeah, I can go on forever. Like, I just feel so passionate about being authentic to
Mhm.
the special needs community and the NICU parents, like being authentic. We want to be the tough person. We want to have it all put together, always knowing what's best for our kids and just being strong. And, we're not going to let ourselves look weak, because then people are going to know. It's like there is strength in your weakness. And that's what the Bible says,
Yeah.
And so we have to use that, and it's okay to be weak. My husband, I feel like, it's important to bring this up, but my husband has brought so much strength through his weakness.
Mm,
And something I never like realized how much of a strong man he is by how authentic and just raw in his emotions he's been, because that's not easy. It's a lot easier to be strong and off-putting
yeah.
than to break into your own emotions and be honest and raw with people. That's a lot
Right.
harder to do than actually be quote unquote strong.
Right. Right.
So
Right. Right. Right.
it's just a learning process. And if I really want to help the community and make an impact, because I feel like my knowledge, there's not a lot of mental health support for parents, and so I really want to bring that out there and help parents understand their symptoms and let them know they're not alone, and just create that community.
Right, right. And I have to say, most parents who I've spoken to did not get that support. And the ones who did get that support, they actually said it helped them get through the NICU journey a lot easier. So I definitely like to raise awareness and talk about it as much as I possibly can so that there can be some change in the NICU care team and the NICU communities across the country. And not just in the country, just in the world period, because I've spoken to parents in, Europe, and they just didn't get the same support. I had one mom whose her NICU experience was very traumatic. And it was so traumatic that I literally in our interview, I was crying, I was bawling, like I was boohooing because and it's not even my story. And I'm just like a
Mhm.
mess. And I must have triggered something in her, not intentionally, but her story, and it was a learning lesson for me to hold back my tears, cry later, but I must have
Mhm.
triggered something in her that she wasn't able to share her story. So we never did the recording. And I wish I had recorded her interview and I could at least share that just to raise awareness of what parents are going through in NICUs across the world. And having a therapist, like it's needed, especially all the different traumas that parents go through in a NICU. So I'm just so grateful for your story. I'm grateful that you're in a good place to be able to share your story, especially to the extent and the magnitude that you did, because you just touched on everything that I think every NICU parent can identify with and every special need parent can identify with, especially with the mental health aspect and how you feel and what you experience mentally and emotionally, even outside of being in the NICU, and how it's a continuous ongoing journey. You just gave such a wealth of information and knowledge and support, I believe, for any parent who's going through the NICU or a special needs parent. So I thank you and commend you for taking the time to share your story, because I know it's going to be a help and a blessing to other people. Do you have any words of encouragement that you would like to share with anyone from the NICU or special needs community?
Yeah, it's one, there's a couple things that I always feel like make a big difference in being able to manage your daily life. Find coping skills. What is it that helps you keep going? Do something that helps you, whether it's working out, reading, whether it's doing yoga, just something that helps you just recenter yourself. Coping
Mm,
skills. Have a support system. Have at least one person that you can truly be honest with and open with. Talk to your partner. Don't shut them out,
mm-hmm.
because finding support in each other is imperative. And share your story
Yes.
so you can find healing. Don't be afraid to share your story.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. And
Oh, and
have
lastly, I don't even know why God, all right? Like God,
absolutely
like if it's not,
prayer.
if you do all those things and you don't put God in it, like you're going to struggle. That's just my opinion, but God. Okay. That's all I gotta say.
I needed God through the NICU experience. That was the only way I could get through it. That was the only reason why I didn't have a therapist, was God got me through it, literally.
Yeah.
The therapist would have helped, but God definitely got me through it.
Yeah.
And how can people follow you for, stories on, following your son's story, and just also just getting so much information in regards to mental health and wellness?
Yeah. So I'm everywhere. On TikTok, I'm on amyj.bar. On YouTube, at the NICU Family. Instagram, I'm at the NICU Family. And then if you go on Instagram, you can just click on my website. The website is hold on. It's called it's amyj.bar.wixsite/amyj.bar.com or something like that. You know what? I'm going to send it to you because it's like a long thing, and you can just put it in the show notes. But if you go on the Instagram page and you go onto the link, and you'll have the link tree there. I write a blog every week. I have my podcast, which is the NICU and Special Needs Family, and I do that every other week. Every Friday, I post worksheets when it comes to mental health. So sometimes if you want to learn on anxiety and special needs parents, communication tips with your care team and special needs parents, special needs parents or NICU parents, you can go on there where it says resources, and you can download all those links, all those pages as well. So you can read them on your own time. And my Instagram is at the NICU Family. So yeah, I'm kind of everywhere.
Definitely follow her on Instagram and all of her other social media outlets. I actually came across Amy from her Instagram page, and she just has such a wealth of information that I say just about every NICU family can definitely identify with. And the knowledge that she's, spreading there, it was helpful for me. And I was like, I have to get her on to share this information on the podcast, because I just felt like if I had this when I was in the NICU, it would have been a wealth of help for me. So I love what you're doing in the community, and I love the work that you're doing, and I'm looking forward to seeing where you expand to. So you guys go follow her, listen to her podcast, like and invite and share, do all those wonderful things. Amy is definitely a valued vessel in this community. And I thank you once again, Amy, for sharing your story and sharing such a wealth of information and knowledge for the community.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you all for tuning in once again for NICU Stories. Go follow Amy today. And until next time, have an amazing day.